Meseches Nedarim Daf Zayin contains three sugyas. First, the Gemara concludes its discussion of various different types of declarations and whether they can be done with a partial statement, the thing we call a yad. The Gemara is going to see how that applies to tzedakah, hefker, and a beis hakisei, a bathroom. Then the Gemara will refer back to our Mishnah and discuss the machlokas between the Chachamim and Rabbi Akiva about what happens when someone says menuda ani, if that counts. The Gemara will have two explanations as to what the argument is about. This will take us into a discussion of the halachos of nidoi, that is excommunication, cherem, and the Gemara will give us a few halachos and discussions about excommunication and a cherem. Let's begin the Gemara. The Gemara has said there is a concept called yad, that is a partial declaration which counts as a full declaration as long as it's clear what you mean, relatively clear. The Gemara has already discussed that there's yad mochiach and yad she'en mochiach. The Gemara is not distinguishing between those two now. The Gemara is just talking about a yad, which in our context means a statement which is somewhat clear but not fully clear, and the Gemara wants to know if it counts as a declaration concerning these three halachos. Now, the source of yados is by Nedarim, and our question is, can you learn these other halachos out of Nedarim or not? So let's begin. The Gemara's first question of yad on this daf is for tzedakah. If somebody makes a declaration that something is tzedakah, but it's not fully clear, so what halacha does that have? The Gemara clarifies the case. Somebody refers to a certain zuz, a coin, and he says this is for tzedakah, and then he turns to another one. And if he would have said this too, that would have been clear, not a shayla, but he didn't say this too, he just said and this. And the question is, when he said and this, that's not fully clear. He could have meant and this is also for tzedakah, or he could have meant and this is for something else. So therefore it's a yad, it's not a fully clear yad. Does that count as tzedakah? It's most logical that he meant that this is also for tzedakah. So what's the question if yad works by tzedakah or not? It depends on a hekish, on a link between tzedakah and neder. So in the psukim describing a neder, that is if somebody vows to make a certain animal into a carbon, there it says kisider neder l'Hashem lekecha lo sa'acha l'shalmo ki deroshi yidrashenu Hashem lekecha mi'imach l'haya v'chachet. That's a neder of a carbon, and shortly after that, two psukim later, it talks about the concept of tzedakah, motzes v'secha tishmer v'asisa kasher nedat Hashem lekecha nedav asher dibarta beficha. From there we learn out that the mitzvah, the concept of bal ta'acher, don't delay what you promise to do. You learn from neder to tzedakah by the connection of these two psukim. The question is, does that link also teach me the concept of yad? Does this link have to teach me all the halachos, or can it only teach the halacha of bal ta'acher, not other halachos? The Gemara doesn't answer the question. The Gemara goes on to its second question. The Gemara says, what about hefker? Is there a concept of yad on a declaration of something hefker or not? Again, this would be if you declare something hefker and you turn to something else and say, and this. So we want to know if he means to say this is hefker too, or if this is just or if he's saying and this has a use for something else. The Gemara asks, hefker and tzedakah should be the same thing. Usually when someone is mafker something, he's mafker for tzedakah. The Gemara says, no, it's not exactly the same thing. Hefker could be taken by wealthy people, but tzedakah can only be taken by poor people. And the question is, if you learn from neder to tzedakah, can you learn from neder to all types of tzedakah, including hefker, which is not reserved just for poor people? And again, the Gemara doesn't answer the question. The Gemara goes to its next question. Just the Gemara says is asked by Ravina. As if somebody declares that a certain structure is going to be used as a bathroom, as a beis hakisei, does that count as a valid declaration? And now it has all the halachos of a beis hakisei, meaning that you're not allowed to be mispali, you're not allowed to say Devarim Shebekdusha, holy words, inside that structure. And again, the question is where it's a partial, it's unclear statement. It turns to one structure and says this is designated as a beis hakisei, and turns to another one, it says and this. And we don't know if he means and this is also beis hakisei, or if he means and this is for something else, although it's most logical that he meant and this is also a beis hakisei. Now again, the Gemara doesn't answer the question, but the Gemara does point out that the entire concept of whether a bathroom gets the halachos of a bathroom just by being verbally denoted without actually ever being used as a bathroom, that itself is unclear. As a matter of fact, Ravina himself asks the question elsewhere, can you give the halachos of a bathroom to a room just by designing and saying that this is going to be a bathroom. So Gemara says Ravina was not clear about that, and he said, and even if it's true, this is a question on top of that. Even if you could do that, what happens if it's a yad? What happens if it's a not fully clear declaration? Does it give the halacha? So he piled these two questions, one on top of the other. All right, this concludes the Gemara's discussion of yados. Now the Gemara turns back to our Mishnah. In the Mishnah, we had seen where someone says a vow on that's forbidding someone else's property to him by saying menuda anilacha, saying I am a menuda to you. What does that do? So the Mishnah had said that does not work, but Rabbi Akiva wasn't sure, and therefore he's machmir. So the Gemara is going to point out, first of all, when Rabbi Akiva was machmir, he wasn't machmir that he held that it works, and therefore you're usher. He wasn't sure. The Gemara makes the point that he wasn't sure, and therefore out of suffix he said to be machmir. That's important because you could also end up with a kula, and that's if somebody violates this. So a violation of a neder incurs malchus, incurs lashes. So Rabbi Akiva, since he was only machmir to hold that this counts as a valid neder, he won't allow a person to get malchus based on that. You don't give malchus on something which is just suffix. You're machmir not to give malchus when you're not clear. So therefore Rabbi Akiva would be machmir and say that it's a valid neder, and therefore it's also for this person to be nene from the other person's property, but he won't get malchus if he does because it's unclear. Now the Gemara wants to focus on what exactly is the machlokes over. What are they arguing? So the Gemara has two approaches. The Gemara's the first approach comes from Rav Papa, and Rav Papa says the argument is, what does the term menuda mean? The term menuda has two potential meanings. First of all, it could mean separated, wandering, like nov and nud tiyah ba'aretz, and therefore he's saying I'm separated from you. That is a very valid language to use for a vow. You could say that I'm separated from him. That's a way of saying that your stuff is also to me. However, the term menuda also means put into cherem, excommunicated. And therefore, that would be another potential meaning. We don't know which one he means. If his meaning was I'm excommunicated from you, says Rav Papa, that would definitely not work as a vow, because it's not a way of making a vow. You're not actually excommunicated. You can't say you are if you aren't, and he doesn't mean to say I have the halachos as if I was, and that would be no good. So there's no machlokes that if he would have said Nedina minach, I'm separated from you, that would work. And if he would have said Mishamtina minach, I am excommunicated from you, that would not work. The question is, what does the term menuda mean? And therefore, which of these two explanations does he go with? That is Rav Papa's explanation. The Gemara notes that Rav Chizda has a different explanation. Rav Chizda assumed that the meaning was I am excommunicated, Mishamtana, and he said that itself is machlokes if it works or not. Rabbi Akiva says he was machmir at least l'chumra to hold misafek that is a valid vow, and that the Chachamim said that it's not valid. We do see that Rav Chizda held this way. Somewhere says that was from an incident that happened with the son of Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, who made a vow that someone else made a vow on him and said Mishamtana. He said I'm excommunicated from his property. Came to Rav Chizda to see if that was valid, and Rav Chizda said it's not valid because we don't hold like Rabbi Akiva. So therefore he clearly held that the machlokes was about that concept, and he held that since we don't hold like Rabbi Akiva, there is no issue based on that. Now the Gemara moves on to give us a number of halachos about cherem. So the Gemara says, first of all, you have a halacha of Rabbi Ila in the name of Rav, who says that if you put someone in excommunication in cherem, so it depends. The halachas of how to restore him depend on how you put him in cherem in the first place. If you put him in cherem not in his presence, you can take him out of cherem not in his presence. However, if you put him in cherem in his presence, you can only take him out of cherem in his presence as well. You can't do it not in front of him. Now the Rishonim have two explanations as to why this might be. One explanation is if you embarrassed him to do it in front of him, you should save his shame by taking him out of cherem also in front of him. Another explanation is if he was there when you put him in cherem, he's going to assume that he's going to be there when you take him out of cherem, and if he sees you violating the terms of the cherem without him having been present when you took him out of cherem, he's going to assume that you're violating the terms even though the cherem still stands. In that situation, you're making it light of the chayrim, you're showing that your chayrim is worthless, and you want to avoid that, and therefore you should not. You should make sure that you take him out of chayrim only in front of him. Next, the halacha the Gemara says is Rav Chanin, the name of Rav, who tells us when you should put someone in chayrim. An example is if you hear someone use the Shem Hashem Livatala, he mentions Hashem's name, the full name, without a valid reason, then someone who hears that should put him into chayrim. If he doesn't put him into chayrim, he himself should be put into chayrim. And the reason is because the mentioning of Hashem's name without a valid reason is a skula for poverty. It brings poverty, and poverty itself is like death, and therefore this is something we want to avoid happening. How do you seal that? So the Gemara quotes a pasuk that says, Ki mesu kol hanashim hamavakshem es nafshecha. The Gemara says that when Moshe Rabbeinu was returning to Mitzrayim, Hashem said, you don't need to worry that there are people who are trying to kill you, because all those people had died. However, those two people were Zerasan and Aviram, and they were most definitely alive. So the Torah therefore must mean that they had become poor. Now the Rishonim discuss that there are three other things which are considered to be dead as well. How do we know that's not one of those? And they explain because those things would not have helped to make it clear to Moshe that he doesn't need to worry. It's only because they became poor and they lost their influence that he didn't need to worry at all. Then the Gemara quotes a brisa that says any place where the Chachamim place their eyes, meaning that they forbade something, it causes either death or poverty. Now the Gemara quotes Rabbi Abba, and he says, I was standing in front of Rav Huna, and he heard a lady say the Shem Hashem Levatala. He put her in chayrim, and he freed up the chayrim right away. And we see from this three halachos. First of all, somebody who hears the name of Hashem being spoken in vain should put that person in chayrim right away. Second of all, we see the halacha that you can only take him out of chayrim when it's in his presence. Since you put him in chayrim in his presence, you have to take him out of chayrim in his presence. So Shonim explained that in this case, he had asked the lady to stay, not to leave, so that he could take her out of her chayrim in her presence. Otherwise, you would not have seen that he'd gone out of his way to do that. And the third halacha, as we see, that you don't have to take time between putting a person into chayrim, taking a person out of chayrim. You could do one right after the other without any problem. Next halacha the Gemara quotes is from Rav Gidol in the name of Rav, and Rav Gidol said that a Talmid Chacham can put himself into chayrim and take himself out of chayrim. The Gemara wants to know what the chiddush in that is. The Gemara says you may think once he's in chayrim he can't take himself out. Being in chayrim means you're stuck; someone else has to take you out. The Gemara compares that to a prisoner who cannot free himself from jail and needs someone else to get him out of jail, even though he got himself into it. And the Gemara quotes an incident that happened that shows this. The Gemara says that Mar Zutra Chasido, whenever he would put a Talmid Chacham into chayrim, he would put himself into chayrim as well. And when he got home, he would take himself out of chayrim in order that his wife should not be restricted from interacting with him from being in chayrim. And when he took himself out of chayrim, he would take that other Talmid Chacham out of chayrim as well. Shonim explained, some of them, that the reason he put himself into chayrim was to show solidarity or to make sure that he didn't forget to take that person out of chayrim. Since he was going to have to take himself out of chayrim, that would be a reminder to make sure that he went and took that person out of chayrim